Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to everyone gathered here today. My name is Kevin McGill, and I am the pastor of this beautiful Green Lake Church. And on behalf of Alvin and the entire family, I want to thank you for being here as we gather to celebrate, remember, and honor the beautiful life of Verla. Whether you're here as a lifelong friend, a neighbor, or family, your presence here is a profound comfort to the family. We are here to grieve together, but also to remember the joy, love, and the remarkable life of Verla. We know that many of you have traveled quite a distance to be with us here today. To our out-of-town guests, a very special welcome to you. We deeply appreciate the incredible effort, time, and let's face it, in today's world, airfare that it took to be here. And hey, since you're here, you might as well enjoy the most beautiful season in one of the most beautiful places on earth. And if you stay just a couple of more weeks, take in a World Cup soccer game while you're here as well. We have a wonderful, large gathering today to honor Verla, both in person and watching online. And because so many of our friends and family are here, if you look around and notice that space is filling up, you're also invited to make use of our balcony area as well. Before we begin our service, I just want to share a few practical notes to ensure everyone is comfortable this afternoon. If you need a restroom, there's restrooms on all floors, including this main one, right out of the sanctuary. Just keep following it around, and there's 2 bathrooms there. And then there's a reception immediately following the conclusion of the service. Everyone is warmly invited to join the family downstairs in the fellowship hall. We would love for all of you to stay, share memories, support one another, and if you aren't sure where to go, just follow the local regulars. There's also an elevator available. As we prepare to share in this service, let us first pause. And before the music begins and the stories are shared, I invite you to join me in a moment of silence, to collect our thoughts, to offer our silent prayers or reflections for Alvin and the family, and to hold Verla close to our hearts. Let us pause now for a moment of reflection.
Et in cor I'm Amanda Straub, Verla's daughter-in-law, married to her son Brant since 2009. A reading from the book of Psalms. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Please be seated. I'm Rona Kwiram. I'm Verla's niece, and I had the privilege of growing up with Verla in my life. She joined the Kwiram family before I was even a teenager, And from that time, she was my ideal, and I'm getting emotional now, my role model and my guiding light. Her impact on my life has been profound, shaping the person I am today. The scripture I'm going to read describes an ideal woman who must have been the Verla of the day. Although from a different era, with different norms and expectations, I can imagine an updated version of this being written about Verla. This comes from the Easy English Bible translation and is found in Proverbs 31. How difficult it is to find a wife who is truly wise. She is worth much more than valuable jewels. Her husband trusts her to help him. He will have everything that he needs. She does good things for him every day of her life. She never tries to hurt him. She's happy to work with her own hands to make clothes with wool and linen. She brings special food from far away, like a ship that travels across the sea. She gets up while it is still night and prepares food for her family. She also gives some to her female servants. She looks carefully at a field and she decides to buy it. She uses her own money to plant a vineyard. She is strong and she always works hard. She knows how to make money as she buys and sells things. Even at night, she's still working. She knows how to make cloth. She gives money to the poor and helpless people. All her family have warm clothes to wear. She is not afraid when cold weather comes. She makes beautiful cloths to cover the beds. Her own clothes are made with valuable linen and purple cloth. People in the city respect her husband. He meets with the other leaders at the city's gate. She uses linen to make clothes, and she sells them. She makes belts to sell to traders. She shows her strength, and people respect her. She is not afraid of what will happen in the future. When she speaks, she says wise words. She is kind as she teaches people what is right. She always works hard and takes care of her family. Her children all agree to thank her. Her husband also praises her. He says, "Many women are wise and they work well, but you are better than all of them." A woman may seem to be beautiful, but that can deceive people. Her body will not be beautiful forever, but a woman who respects the Lord with fear will receive honor. Praise her for everything that she has done. Everyone in the city should know about her, and they should praise her as she deserves.
Wow. The faces in this room right now. Thank you for being here. This is a space with a lot of power in my psyche. And right now, you guys have filled it with a lot more meaning than it even had before. I'm Sydney. For the few of you who don't know that, I'm Verla's daughter, my brother Brant. We're charged with telling you my mother's life story so that the tributes that follow have some scaffolding to hang on. And I'll take you through the first half or so. Verla, you might not have guessed, was born in a chicken coop. She was born at her grandparents' homestead right outside of Buell, Idaho. She was the second of 3 children. Davis was her older brother. A lot of his kids, grandkids are here, great-grandkids. And her younger sister, Lila, was 4 years younger, and a lot of her kids and grandkids are here today. Verla was born near the beginning of World War II and the end of the Great Depression. So the art of being frugal was a feature in her family for decades to come. Verla often said of her mother that she could make a penny squeal before it got spent. Their nightstands were wooden apple boxes. Their bed sheets were flour sacks stitched together with French seams. Their gardens were always bountiful. Gardens meant you wouldn't go hungry. Verla grew up believing she was a poor kid from Idaho without a history. We'll come back to that. In her first 12 years, Verla and her family moved a lot, 2 years in each place. Her father often pastored about 5 churches at a time, Adventist churches, Olympic Peninsula, Maryland for seminary, Renton, Olympia, Vancouver, Washington. He pastored and they commuted in their Studebaker. He preached, and boy did he preach. But he also renovated or built the churches from the ground up himself. He would organize Sunday work parties for the congregations, and his output was monumental. And the church leadership took advantage of this and his work ethic to refurbish many of the Adventist churches in Western Washington. Verla, too, learned to work hard. Her mother also instilled that in her and held her to high standards from a very young age. When she was 7, she was put in charge of laundry, and not just the family laundry, the parishioner laundry. It had to be done every day because one of the parishioners was incontinent, and I'm very glad right now that the children don't know what that means. Verla used a wringer washer and lifted heavy, sopping flour sack sheets into a manual wringer as a 7-year-old to squeeze the water out. To reach the clothesline to dry these outside, she had to balance herself on a wooden apple box. She was just too small to reach, and it had to be done just right. Verla learned to do it just right. And as she began to do many more tasks, in the same way she used to do many more tasks over the years, with an extremely high tolerance for heavy labor and pain, paired with a very aesthetic, perfectionistic eye. The Davis-Michael family did not celebrate birthdays or holidays. Christian holidays were seen as pagan, and Verla's early memories were often of her family moving house on her birthdays. They'd be scrubbing drawers, boxes, her whole life in flux every birthday. So take that in for a moment. You don't celebrate birthdays, you move at many of her birthdays. So now a quick show of hands in this congregation. If you ever came to an event that Verla hosted at their home for a birthday shower, wedding, graduation, prom, church gathering, potluck, dinner party, a holiday, whatever it is, raise your hand. Okay, look around. Verla hosted thousands. She entertained for the Adventist Forum in Cambridge, for the University of Washington, for the Green Lake Church, for friends, for relatives. 10 people, 25 people, 100 people, 200 people. This happened a lot. And certain people who will go unnamed were put to work for this. So this history might serve as a helpful context for some of the things you guys might be familiar with Verla. The defining experience of Verla's childhood, and maybe Lila's too, was both her father, 6'4", physically powerful, boxer, brilliant, and her father's dismissal from the Adventist church when she was 11. He was not temperamentally suited to be subordinate to anyone but God. I'll leave it at that. The church was not just a place Verla went every Saturday. It was her school, it was her community, it was her family's livelihood. It was their entire life. So they were expelled from this community. So to understand Verla, you need to understand what impact this event had on a young girl. Imagine what it meant for her to be expelled from the tribe, to be cast out from the acceptance of the herd. And now let's return to these gatherings we were just talking about. Verla knew that to be shunned, to be new in a place, to be isolated for whatever reason, that doesn't just have psychological effects. That becomes physical. That becomes identity altering. So her experience as an outcast in those years is perhaps why she would look a stranger in the eye, ask them their story, and invite them home. So when I hear people describing Verla as somebody who entertained or hosted, I feel like the picture is incomplete. Or even when we talk about what Kathy Batchuk and Adita Orban are preparing downstairs with the Green Lake Deaconesses right now. We're going to be gathering down there very soon. And what many more Green Lake women did, like Carol Keith, Shirley Mayer, Stephanie Mays, Katie Jo Johnson, Joyce Grauman, Sally Hasselbrack. I'm missing so many I know. Oh, and Ray DiMazzo, of course. This is not throwing parties. This is building community. This is weaving people and families together over generations. This is having each other's backs. Verla did this with a radical embrace everywhere she went for the rest of her life. This is biography, though. So after her father's dismissal from the church, the family moved to Portland, Oregon, a home with a chicken coop and a mature orchard. And Verla decided that the coop needed life. So as a 12-year-old, she called around to find a brown egg-laying bunch of hens. Eventually, she found some by just making phone calls. I don't know whether she had a newspaper clipping or a phone book. And she trudged a few miles walking in Portland by herself to buy them, crossing the new freeway overpass without a map. She got where she needed to go, stuffed the hens in burlap gunny sacks, 5 or 6 to each shoulder, and walked back home. The hens foraged on fruit that fell from the branches over their pointy-roofed coop, prune plums, pears, and Gravenstein apples. She gave them corn, beans, raspberries, and blueberries from her mother's beautiful garden. And she began to sell the eggs to her teachers at school. Now, growing up, we called my mother the telephone commando. This was the days before the internet, when she ran a business from a sliver of an office at home, working her typewriter and a Rolodex and the phone book. She had an uncanny ability to get on the phone and solve any problem with creativity, deep research, and a dogged work ethic. And woe be to you if you told her no. Verla got to yes, one way or another. And these commando days all started with a 12-year-old girl calling around to find a dozen laying hens. When they moved to Portland in 1952, her father began a vitamin distribution business out of their basement to improve his former congregants' health. Then he wanted to prove to doctors that the supplements worked, so he experimented with basic lab testing in 1955. He dug out a space under their front porch to install sinks, to wash and sterilize test tubes, and before the decade was out, this little business that started in their Portland basement was at the forefront of a global revolution in medical testing. You could now mail in blood, urine, or stool samples and get diagnoses. You didn't have to rely on whatever equipment your doctor happened to own in their office. United Medical Laboratories was one of the pioneers of today's lab testing, places like LabCorp or Quest Diagnostics. Her mother became the vice president in charge of finances. Verla did office work. Lila had her roles. Davis had his. And this was all while she was starting to happen while she was still in high school. But Verla wanted to get away. College became her chance. First Walla Walla College, now Walla Walla University. Then she made her way to England, to Newbold College, where she showed up in a green suit and a giant pink orchid. Picture that. This was the time her life began to take off and become her own. She finally had the distance to discover who she was. You'll hear in a little bit from Larry Garrity, who was her classmate at Newbold. In Portland, she had studied violin with Claire Hodgkins, a protege of Jascha Heifetz. In England, Verla began to win awards for her violin and singing, and her conductor at Newbold encouraged her to attend the Watford School of Music there, where she started down a track to become a professional musician. She traveled across Europe, toured, built lifelong friendships, but her parents didn't want her settling down in Europe and brought her home. And this brought her to La Sierra University in California, where she became a pre-med at the urging of her father so she could work in the family business. But fate threw a wrench in that. After a Christmas concert at which she performed in the orchestra, she met Alvin Kwiram, a farm kid from Manitoba, and a newly minted PhD from Caltech. She had a calculus book under one arm and a violin under the other. It was love at first sight. You can't really understand my mother's life in its full arc without understanding who Alvin was to her. With him by her side, everything changed. Her full blossoming began. Her cellular healing began. They were married in August 1964 and spent their honeymoon driving across the country to their new life together in Boston. Verla now felt free to figure out her own mind, now emancipated from the pull of her very defining family. She decided she wanted to do a PhD in the history of ideas at Boston University. So she began to read poetry, novels, things not widely accepted in the Adventist church. Her first assignment was Ulysses by James Joyce. So when my brother was applying for college many years later, my mom asked him what he was writing his college applications about. He said matter-of-factly, Calvin and Hobbes. You know, the cartoon strip. That's what most people do when they apply to Harvard. But anyway. But here was my mom's reaction. Calvin and Hobbes. That's interesting. Pairing a philosopher with a theologian. John Calvin, theologian, Thomas Hobbes, philosopher. Yes, that was the household we grew up in. Verla and Alvin had no money as they started their new life together. She was a graduate student. My dad had just finished his postdoc at Stanford. Now he was on the chemistry faculty at Harvard, and they slept on anything they could get for free or very little. Bunk beds, hospital beds, twin box springs, the floor, and finally, luxuriously, a queen mattress on the floor. Verla was not pleased. But even though her kitchen was too small and the furniture they got from fire sales, she told me near the end of her life that her Cambridge years were her happiest. In Cambridge, Verla and Alvin joined forces with a few other Adventist academics to challenge the church to modernize. The church had resisted the scientific discoveries of the 20th century. It had some, let's say, antiquated and opaque financial practices, and it had a rigid view of Ellen White, the prophetess whose visions were at the heart of the church. Roy Branson thought maybe they could rally a few more students to join them. Verla looked at him quizzically. In this town? Or the 100 colleges and universities? Telephone commando, on the job. Within 2 years, she had over 300 people, and soon they became a distinct independent movement within the church, with a network of chapters across the country, which they called the Adventist Forum. Alvin became the organization's first president. Larry Garrity, whom you'll hear from, was a primary mover and shaker in the movement, and they did this without schism within the church. The movement and Spectrum magazine that emerged from it is still thriving today. In the 1960s, Verla also got interested in genealogy. She was a kid from Idaho without history, remember? So she did oral histories with many family members, dragged us kids to cemeteries and archives. We scrolled through microfiches. Yeah, that was the family. Through this sleuthing, she figured out that her family did have history in the United States that went back to the early Puritans in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And by the time she was done, and when she discovered that Benjamin Franklin was her first cousin many times removed, she knew she was not a kid without history. So from Cambridge, Verla and Alva moved to Seattle in 1970. This would become Verla's home for the rest of her life. The plan was to live a quieter life here and have kids. Okay, quiet, right. Quiet it was not. And it's in Seattle where she would have kids, and at the same time she would fight lawsuits and win, build a multifamily real estate business, build 2 beautiful houses, go on many sabbaticals around the world, travel the world, become president of the Association of Adventist Women, and sit on many boards. But that's the other part of her life. Her life was full, and much of what gave it meaning were the people in it. The richness, the meaning, including many of you guys here today. You were the community she was trying to weave together, and this was a day she would not have wanted to miss.
I'm Brant. I'm Verla's son. I've been tasked with talking about the second half of my mom's life. And as a Kwiram and a Michael, in this case more as a Michael, I have a little trouble doing what I'm told. So bear with me, please. Members of my immediate family know that I am, shall we say, mildly obsessed with the book of Job. Today we find ourselves in a church, which I think gives me carte blanche to talk about Job all I want. Here is a blameless, God-fearing man, disaster visited upon him for no reason he can understand. Having lost wealth and children, the adversary then covers him in boils. He is despised by his neighbors. Even food is made revolting to him. He survives to contend with authority, the ultimate authority in his case, and is vindicated. He wins his case, if you will. Having won his case, he is compensated with even greater wealth than he originally possessed. And the good book tells us that he ended his life in generosity. In particular, that he gave his daughters an estate among their brothers. In other words, not only his sons received an inheritance, but his daughters did too. And this was far from the norm in his rigidly patriarchal society. Job began in biblical terms with quite a lot of bread, lost his bread, and ended up with twice as much bread as he had had at the start. This is not the forum to reflect on whether Job's compensation answered his ultimate need. That said, though we may not live by bread alone, it is awfully helpful and comforting to have bread. Whether or not Job's soul was satisfied with this outcome, it seems that his wound also, in important ways, opened his soul. Verla's life started, if you will, after the bet has been placed. She was born in a converted chicken coop and knew pain early. In her last few years, as she battled her cruel affliction, she repeatedly asked that we print a photo in her memorial booklet of her at the age of 6 months or so, a photo showing the fear in her eyes. We were never able to definitively identify this image, but the message was clear. She started life not only poor, but also afraid. Her father was a man one did not want to anger, and he was very quick to anger. Verla did not understand what the source of this suffering was, what justification it had. And then, to add insult to injury, her father was booted from the ministry. The family was cast out from the community they had known. The family's house must have felt like it had been built on sand. The first two major inflection points in Verla's life came when she left home for college and when she met Alvin. And then in her 30s came a third when she contended with authority. She sued the public company that had acquired and then neglected to pay for her parents' business. She won her case, and in compensation received a meaningful allotment of bread, enough to acquire an apartment building and then work her tail off to keep the venture going. So it may not be obvious that I've been tasked with a description of Verla's life after Sydney and I left home. Please be patient. Before we left home, Sydney and I, Verla worked hard, and after we left, she also worked hard. But the nature of that work changed. She spent less time focused on her business. For starters, Verla was already an accomplished hostess and serious genealogist, but starting in the 90s, she took both these pursuits to new levels. As my father noted in the life sketch that you have a copy of, that's the thing with the blue cover, in a single year, in the aughts, Verla put on 30 events with 25 guests or more at her home with food that she often largely made herself. And that's not including several events in that same year with 100 people or more. On the genealogy front, she began to use the internet to extend the family tree both outward and into the past, and reached out to far-flung relatives in South America and Europe. She chaired the Association of Adventist Women's Woman of the Year Award Committee and pushed to make the awardees more international to reflect the true reach of the church. She subsequently was elected president of the AAW, a role which she used to globalize the Woman of the Year Award. And there were her 12 years on the board of La Sierra University, during which time she advocated forcefully for the institution not to sell outright all its undeveloped former farmland near campus, but lease the land to create a long-term income stream. Inspired and motivated by her friendship with Jennifer Mabuka, whom you'll hear from later, there were trips to Kenya to establish scholarship support for AIDS-orphaned girls to attend Kenya's most prestigious prep school. If one were uncharitable, one might list her various efforts for the 25 years or so following 1990 and perceive a lack of focus. But I think that interpretation would be incorrect. I think the correct interpretation is that Verla found herself with the means and freedom to try to make as many people as she could feel supported and included and recognized. Whether it was welcoming strangers to a dinner party, or finding orphans in Kenya to put through high school, or trying to help La Sierra secure long-term funding to provide to a new generation of students the kinds of experiences and opportunities Verla herself had found so valuable, or using the AAW awards to recognize strong, path-breaking women who might otherwise have remained obscure, or using genealogy to give distant relatives a sense of their own family history, or even using genealogy to welcome people into the family who had been adopted and were looking for their biological lineages. She was constantly searching for that next opportunity, and ideally the next platform she could use to help feed someone who was hungry. We know that after Job suffered, he ended in generosity. That outcome is far from ordained, however. In the book of Matthew, Jesus offered two different visions of leaven. In Matthew 16, he warned his disciples of the leaven of the Pharisees, a seed that corrupts. However, in Matthew 13, he said, "The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour till it was all leavened." We can all bring to mind people we know who are derailed as adults by the wounds of their youth. Often this takes the form of turning inward and becoming selfish, losing the ability to give and retaining only the capacity to take. This is a kind of rot. It is a leavening that destroys. To me, the triumph of Verla's life was not simply that she overcame her early challenges, nor that she won a significant lawsuit, or 2 or 3 or 4, nor that she built a successful business and went on to serve the AAW in La Sierra, among several other institutions, including this church, in positions of substantial responsibility. It's that she took the sour leaven from her early life and hid it in the flour, letting it steadily rise and rise. Yes, she did make a wonderful loaf of bread for herself and her family, but beyond that, and especially in her later years, she made innumerable loaves for all those she could find and touch. Following the example of Job, that sour leaven expanded her soul into a tireless and tremendous generosity.
Hello, my name is Kim Campbell. Verla was my aunt from her brother Davis. Today I'm going to read to you Sonnet 116 by William Shakespeare. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends when the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempest and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool. Through rosy lips and cheeks, within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved.
I'm John McClarty. My personal acquaintance with Verla began in 2012 when I was invited to be the senior pastor here at this congregation. But my knowledge of Verla and Alvin goes way back before that. I took a year out of college to volunteer at a church center in Times Square. And while there, I met Adventist graduate students from Columbia University who spoke about the Adventist Forum and, of course, about the Kwirams that they knew from up north in Boston. So from that time on, I because of Alvin and Verla's connection with Spectrum Magazine and the Association of Adventist Forums, I felt like I knew that I was following them from afar. So then when I got to meet them here at Green Lake and get personally acquainted, it was like taking up an old friendship. So thank you, Alvin, and thanks to Verla. Borrowing Alvin's words, Verla's life was characterized by an implacable dedication to justice and compassion. I've lived with those words, Alvin, as I was trying to think, what can I bring as I bring from Scripture, speaking for the church, an implacable dedication to justice and compassion. And my mind ran to the words of the Gospel of Matthew. In the Gospel of Matthew, a number of times, Jesus comes back to the theme of Judgment Day. Very frequently, he does so as a challenge to his audience not to confuse formal religious rectitude with righteousness. Rather, righteousness was rooted in justice and compassion. And Jesus uses a number of stories and metaphors, parables, and the most famous, perhaps, is one called the sheep and the goats. So, at the last day, the king is seated on the throne and summons humanity. And as the story goes, he separates the people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. Goats on the left, it's always dangerous. I'm like, yeah, that's left. At least it's my left. Sheep on the right. And then after he separated them out, he says to the sheep, well done. Welcome to the kingdom that has been prepared for you. Because when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was a foreigner, you welcomed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. Welcome into the kingdom. And then he says to the goats, sorry, cursed ones, off to darkness with you, because I was hungry and you did not feed me. I was thirsty and you did not give me water. I was naked and you did not cover me. I was a foreigner and you did not welcome me. I was in prison and you didn't visit. And the people protest. Oh, wait a minute. The sheep go, we never saw you hungry. And the goats say, we never saw you hungry. They were looking for the wrong thing. How do you find Jesus? Well, just look for somebody hungry. Look for someone thirsty and do what needs to be done. And I think of these tales of Verla. Entertaining, welcoming. We've heard the story that out of her own wounding, she wanted to make sure that people were included. She worked at that. Compassion. And then justice. Another biblical passage. One that I've spent in recent years, a lot of time thinking about. It's in the book of Revelation. When I've done sermon series on the book of Revelation, I call it the divine fairy tale. There's a monster, there's a villain, there's a great king, there's a damsel in distress, there's a great war, and at the end, the heroes live happily ever after. Now, what I've said so far, this is the common stuff for fairy tales. But there's one other element that sets this apart, at least from all the classic tales I know. At the end of the book, there is again a judgment scene. There's a throne and all the people gathered. But unlike almost every, not every, but almost every other judgment scene, in this one, the people are not before the throne as obedient, yielding servants. In this final picture, they are on the throne. The vision is that the final wrap up of history is a justice that is so transparent, so universal, that it is justice itself that is on the throne, not a personal authority, not somebody who says, this is just, you believe me, but a justice that is transparent and evident to all. And fueled by this vision of a justice that is not dependent on church authority, sophisticated philosophy, human systems. This is part of, it seems to me, essential element of the liberal Adventism that Alvin and Verla have lived. That justice and compassion stand above every human authority. And it is the way we order our lives. We come here today to grieve. We're here because of a big hole in our hearts and in the world. Verla's left an empty space, and that hurts. And because we are in church, we live in hope, even in the face of death. We speak of resurrection, but still here we carry the heaviness. She's left an empty space. And it seems to me the greatest way we honor her is to embrace her implacable dedication to justice and compassion, and to do what we can to live that vision.
I'm John Brunt, and I first knew Verla when we sat next to each other in our assigned chapel seats when we were students at La Sierra College. I'm reading a poem by Gerard Manley Hopkins. Thou art indeed just, Lord, if I contend with thee. But, sir, so what I plead is just. Why do sinners' ways prosper? And why must disappointment all I endeavor end? Wert thou my enemy, O thou my friend, how wouldst thou worse, I wonder, than thou dost defeat thwart me? Oh, the sots and thralls of lust do in spare hours more thrive than I, that spend, sir, life upon thy cause. See, banks and brakes now leaved, how thick, laced they are again with Freddie Chervil. Look, and fresh wind shakes them. Birds build, but not I build, no, but strain. Time's eunuch, and not breed one work that wakes. Mine, O thou Lord of life, send my roots rain.
I'm Larry Garrity, a classmate of Verla's, where we first met at Newbold College in England in 1959. Well, why did my wife Jillian and I come up from Southern California for this service? Because the connections between the Michaels and Kwirams with the Keoghs and Garritys go a long way back. Verla's dad studied at the Adventist Seminary in Washington, D.C. under Jillian's granddad, George Keogh, in the 40s. Thus began a lifelong friendship and correspondence between these two men. Were it not for Mr. Michael's generosity and caring, George Keogh, retired in Northern Ireland, would have died sooner and with much poorer quality of life than he did. Verla and her sister Lila were friends of Jillian and me when we were all students at Newbold College in England in the late 50s, early 60s. In fact, Jillian and I, before we were married, picked up a VW Bug at the Wolfsburg, Germany factory and then shipped it to New York City, driving it home across the US for the Michaels and their Portland United Medical Lab, much to the consternation of our parents. At Harvard, in our graduate school days, the Kwirams opened up their one-bedroom apartment, which you've heard about, including welcoming our baby, till we found our own apartment. They mentored us, along with the other Adventist graduate students in the Boston area, including, among many, Charles and Marta Teal. They got us going to the Stoneham Church, where they belonged. As you've heard, they began the Association of Adventist Forum and Spectrum as a missionary activity for Adventist grad students. And it continues today, as you know. Alvin, the first president, and his successor, who is with us today, Carmen Lau. After the Kwirams moved to Seattle, they had many of their friends to Green Lake Church for its lectureship series, including me. Loyally, they kept in touch with all of us while we were sympathized with the sagas of their successive home moves. We remember their famous hospitality at Newbold and Boston reunions, as well as important family events, including Verla's 60th birthday celebration at the turn of the millennium. They were the only non-family members to join us on our 50th anniversary cruise to Alaska that was shown in the pictures. At La Sierra University, where the Teals, the Clarks, the Wisbys, and we have served, all of us being here today, we needed an astute business person with good academic sense to be a trustee. There was none better than Verla, an alumna, loyal and supportive, who helped us through some pretty thorny issues, not the least of which was what to do with our excess land when the farm closed. When we started, La Sierra was $8 million in debt. By the time Verla and her successor, Alvin, left their years of trusteeships, we had built up an endowment exceeding $100 million. Nor can we forget Verla's support for La Sierra Women's Resource Center and her leadership in the Association of Adventist Women, as you've heard. Right during the time when the church was neglecting women in leadership, Verla devised ways to discover and honor Adventist women, not only in the US, but from around the world. What kind of words would we use to describe Verla? You've heard several today. Some that come to mind include both serious and humorous, thoughtful, logical and consistent, antiquarian. She always had what you needed in her file. Generous, intense. Her life is a perfect example of the American work ethic. High-class taste, upholder of the highest standards in everything, loyal to her friends, warm and decent. So in her honor, all of us had to be here, right? Yes, we're here to honor the memory of the woman who not only created the ideal family with Alvin, Brant, and Sydney, but who also created family for all of us. Her thoughtful love and care for all of us defines friendship in action. John McMurray may have best defined that friendship as follows. Friendship, fellowship, communion, love are all in one way or another liable to convey a false or partial meaning. But what is common to them all is the idea of relationship between us which has no purpose beyond itself, in which we associate because it is natural for human beings to share their experience, to understand one another, to find joy and satisfaction in living together, in expressing and revealing themselves to one another. If one asks why people form friendships or love one another, the question is simply unanswerable. We can only say, because it is the nature of persons to do so. So Verla, we love you. Thanks for being our friend. We're honored to be here. Rest in peace till that glorious resurrection morning.
In 1992, I arrived in Seattle as a 49-year-old new bride with my new 47-year-old husband, Hartwig Eichberg, who had never lived outside of Germany. Neither of us had ever been in Seattle, and we knew absolutely no one here. If one moves into a new place and one has no children or pets, it is very difficult to make friends. Shortly after we moved into our Queen Anne house, our dear, wonderful friends, Larry and Jillian Garrity, came to have dinner with us. As they were leaving, Larry handed me a piece of paper with a name and contact information and said, "Awilda, this is a couple you should contact. I think they will be very good friends to you and Hart." The name on the paper was Alvin and Verla Kwiram. Soon after that, I called the phone number on the paper, and a woman answered the phone. It was Verla. I introduced myself and told her that Larry Garrity had given me her name and directed me to her. She laughed when I told her I was new in Seattle from Germany and knew no one here. And she said, "I tell you what, I am having a small gathering this weekend. Why don't you and your husband come? We will meet, and I will introduce you to people in Seattle." Well, we arrived at a beautiful large house. And if you know Verla, her small gathering was for a table set for about 25 people. She was the Pearl Mesta of the Adventist community here in Seattle. I marveled that, not knowing us at all, she had so generously opened her home and welcomed us to her table. That is who Verla was. We had a lovely evening, and from the first moment I met her, I looked into her eyes, and it was love at first sight. She opened her heart and her home and adopted me and Hart, or Hart and me. But she adopted me and became my big sister. I am so thankful to have had her and Alvin in my life these past 34 years. I will miss her terribly, but I hold her in my heart. I thank God for showing me through Larry that he always provides and we are never left comfortless.
Good night, my angels, time to close your eyes and save these questions for another
So my name is Jennifer Mabuka, and I'm an adopted Kwiram member since 2004. And on behalf of my two daughters, Sandra and Sally, I want to thank the Kwiram family for the privilege of honoring Verla today. My story is going to fit into a lot of what you've heard. My first trip to the United States was in the fall of 2004. I had come to the University of Washington as a non-matriculated student in the global health, and I was just testing whether graduate school was the right path for me. A few weeks into the program, I asked my host for an Adventist church, and they told me about Green Lake, and so I came to Green Lake Church. And after fellowship, out in the lobby, Verla approached me, and she, as she tended to do, she immediately started asking me questions. What's your name? What brings you to town? Where are you from? When I told her I come from Kenya, she paused and said, we need to talk. That Sabbath afternoon, at the Kwiram's home by Lake Washington, we began to talk. I later learned that she had just finished reading a book describing the role and place of Adventist women in Kenya. She didn't quite like what she had read, and she was looking for some additional information and confirmation. That fall, we did a lot together, including attending the Association of Adventist Women meeting in Andrews University. As you've heard, as the president of AAW, Verla sought to understand the daily experiences of women, not just here, but around the world, so it could inform her work. I too have a lot of a passion for women and girl issues, and so we connected. And I was to become a link to her, the stories of Kenyan women and girls to her. Craving to witness some of the realities that she had read for herself and the stories that we had shared, she came to Kenya in 2006. And instead of staying in a hotel, she intentionally stayed at my mother's house because she told me she wanted a brief experience of my life and that of my mother. During this time we spent together, a lot of time in my mother's kitchen as she cooked around her three-stone kitchen. We visited several girls' schools and women leaders and discussed issues on HIV/AIDS and other barriers that impede girls' potential. These conversations were later to inform the establishment of the Starehe Girls Scholarship. In 2007, I returned to UW to pursue my PhD as a single mother of two daughters, Sandra and Sally. Sally was a toddler then. By this time, she had seen something in me, and she was committed to supporting me. So one afternoon, as we were driving around Seattle, buying furniture for my apartment unit, she asked what my stipend was. I had just received my pay stub, so I pulled it out and I showed it to her. $817 before tax. How are you going to make it with this much? She had asked me. In the days that followed, Verla fully furnished an apartment unit at the Villager to impeccable standards, including high-quality cooking pots, because she had told me when she was growing up, her mother didn't have very good quality pots, and those pots would burn her food, and she didn't want me to experience that, and no woman should experience that. And then she put Kenyan-themed wall paintings for us. And then, on top of that, she substantially subsidized the rent. On the day when she was handing me the keys to the unit, she looked around and she said, I can live in this unit, and so can you. As though that wasn't enough, as I said, she literally adopted us. She gave us a sense of belonging. She included us in everything that was important to her. We spent birthdays, major holidays, Sabbath lunches. We attended events at Benaroya Hall. We visited the Skagit Valley Tulip Festival and more. She was determined to give us an enriched Pacific Northwest or American experience. But I was cognizant that she was spending a lot of time and giving us a lot of attention. So once I asked her if I was disrupting her routine. She replied, "I would ignore you if I didn't have time for you." And she never once did. She listened and coached me on how to deliver my graduate school presentations. She attended Sandra's grandparents' days at Cypress Adventist School, and she drove Sally to a short notice high school interview that shaped her educational path. But graduate school journey wasn't always easy, as you know. Whenever I hit a bump, Verla would gently remind me that all is well that ends well. These words kept me focused on the finish line. And when I crossed it in 2012, she threw an elegant graduation party, complete with a professional photographer and my favorite carrot cake. And on it, she had the words, "You did it." Today, I'm here, and my daughters, and we are all thriving. Verla was indeed God's hands and feet, working in his vineyard with intention, with dignity, and with deep love. She was driven by genuine care, easing people's burdens without condensation, and I think that's very important. As I finish, I reflect on Maya Angelou's words, whom Verla so kindly took me to listen to. "I may forget many things, but I will never forget how she made me feel." The talking has since stopped, but the love I felt remains forever. I will miss Verla dearly, but will continue to honor her by passing on the love she so freely gave to me and my girls. Thank you so much for listening.
My name is Ken, and my late wife Susanna and I have known the Kwiram since about 1979 when we started attending this church. Invited in part, I suspect, because of my large collection of classic leisure suits, which have become an unfortunate tradition in Green Lake events, and which I'm still waiting to become valuable. Thought I'd share one story that's a specific story about a general characteristic of Verla's character. In 1982, our son Kenito was born with serious heart defects. He was sent to Children's Hospital, where 3 months later, major surgery was done successfully. My large family, I have 5 sisters, gathered for the event, filling most of the urgent care waiting room for the 8+ hours of the operation. In the middle of the day, unexpectedly, Verla arrived with a complete turkey dinner, prepared, not purchased. Served on fine china, silver, and glassware, it fed our whole family and anybody else who was in the waiting room that day. After eating, she took all the dirty dishes and went back home. Hospital employees remarked about it for days, some saying they had never seen anything like it. It was exceptional in the scope of the plan, the generosity it expressed, and mostly in the sheer amount of physical effort it took. Exceptional, but not for the person who did it. For Verla Kwiram, it was almost routine, expected. Just another day. The life we celebrate today was big in every aspect. And like others, I do want to stress the unique and enormous work ethic. We long ago concluded that if that was what was required to have, much less build a house on the lake, well, we'll just be content with what we have. Verla was the most cultured and sophisticated person that we knew. But yet Alvin and Verla accepted my invitation to go and hear the band Radiohead, only a little past their prime. As Alvin said, well, it was a happening. When we reflect on Verla's life and its effect on us, we have to feel profoundly blessed to have been proximate, touched by, or shared in it. I know that Verla was very important in inspiring what little bigness I have in my life. There are a lot of lessons and conclusions we can make. I want to just highlight one. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Walk with the wise and become wise." Studies of happiness, wellness, even longevity consistently show that the quality of our friends is more important than the quantity. Summed up in a quote, "Be careful who you call your friends. I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies." That from the American philosopher Al Capone. Thank you, it's an honor.
My name is Carla Walters, and I will be telling you how I came to know Verla. I knew her as a friend, and really she became a sister to me. And the way we met, as you've already heard, is Verla had her phone tree. And my husband, Ken Walters, had been a graduate student at Stanford when Alvin was doing a postdoc there. And I don't know that Ken even met Verla, because every weekend Alvin was going down to Southern California to woo her. But Alvin did know Ken, and he knew Ken's older brother, Tom Walters, who had helped found a chapter of the Association of Adventist Forums. We were living in Corvallis, Oregon, where Ken was an assistant professor at the business school, and I was finishing up the coursework for a PhD in English at the University of Oregon in Eugene, when Ken got a phone call from the University of Washington inviting him to interview for a job. So we went up to Seattle, and Ken contacted Alvin, and Verla called me up a few weeks later in Corvallis and said, when you come back to look for a place to live, come and see me. So I did. I arrived with my 7-month-old baby girl, and she greeted me at the door with 2-year-old Brant. And it was almost an instant communication between us. She was on bed rest, so it was amazing that she was entertaining anybody for any reason. But we learned how many things we had in common. Not only did we have husbands who were academics and had an interest in studying English literature, but we shared a passion for classical music, for the Adventist church, and for theater. And we also were had shared concerns about the practical needs of being young mothers. So we were young mothers together. Our children were born, about 18 months apart between their age gaps, so they were almost like quadruplets. And we learned to trust each other's judgment about so many things. Verla offered me an opportunity to find a good pediatrician, Dr. Gordon Pine, and I offered her the opportunity to find a good Suzuki piano teacher for Sydney, and a preschool for Brant at the University of Washington Child Development Research Center, where my daughter Karen was enrolled. So it was that, but also the church was an important part of our communication with each other. As young mothers with children in the beginners grade group, we shared the leadership of every division as our children grew up. So Verla would be ahead of me because her children were just a little bit older than mine. She'd train me in the way she thinks it should have been done, and I followed suit. And so first I was in the beginners, then I was in the kindergarten, then I was in the primary, and then we moved away, but for a few years. But it was a joy to have all those fellowship hours with each other. At that time, we used to have just the children's division, I think it was just cradle roll and kindergarten preemie, would have a potluck once a month, and there was a set menu. Everybody was supposed to bring a casserole of lasagna and contribute to a large green salad. Somebody would bring the bread, and somebody else would bring the dessert. Very simple menu, but it was very well coordinated. When we didn't have potlucks, we would meet at each other's homes, and the children had a ball, and the parents had wonderful discussions. Verla became something like a godmother to my daughters. And in fact, Karen's birthday is the same day, August 7th, as Verla's, and we didn't learn that till Karen was quite a bit older than, we didn't actually know it, but Verla hosted a wedding shower and a baby shower for Karen, and actually invited people she didn't know to come to her home for my daughter Mary's cello recital when she finished her master's degree. We took vacations and trips together. Sometimes we went water skiing on the little lake that we had a cabin on, very primitive place actually, and Alvin's mother came along and seemed to enjoy being out in the woods. One time we took a few days to go over to eastern Washington to water ski on Sun Lakes. And there was a memorable year when we had moved to New Mexico, and we all got together in the Pasayten Wilderness for a horse packing trip. And I can tell you that Verla could camp. She knew how to make foil pack, well, we trained her how to make foil packet meals in an open fire, and she brought along pieces of fresh salmon. So we had a great time, even though the weather sometimes was rainy. And we moved away because my husband Ken had been invited to become a business school dean, first at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo and then at the University of New Mexico. That was in 1983 when we moved away. And Verla had been training me in how to be the hostess with the mostest. So as a going away gift, she presented me with a beautiful silver platter that I could use to do my entertaining. And having been well trained by Verla, I also cooked the food whenever I had guests over for the School of Business. We shared a gift of having two mothers still living when Ken and I moved back to Seattle in 1994. My mother was recently widowed, and Verla's mother was widowed and living in Portland. And together, Verla and I had a girls' weekend in which we drove down to Oregon to visit both of our mothers together. And it was just a wonderful bonding experience. And it made me realize that Verla was a sister I never had, because we had so many things in common. Even though we had different mothers, we had the same feelings for them. And finally, we had to share an interest in genealogy. I don't know who got it first, Verla or me. But Verla really dug into her family history in New England, as I think you've already heard. And I dug into Alvin's history and my father's history in Ukraine. And together we made a trip in 2013 to find the villages where Alvin's family and my family had lived. It turns out they were only a few miles apart. So that was quite interesting. But my final thought is the hardship that Verla went through in her final years never completely obliterated her sense of joy. And this came to me really vividly the last time I saw Verla, which was, I think, last fall, and some friends were visiting, and the Andreassens were there. And Verla recognized her, what she always called as her Greek sister, I think it's Dimitri. I don't remember her name properly, but anyway, Mrs. Andreassen was immediately, Verla recognized her and just smiled and showed so much joy. And you just know that even if she couldn't speak, she understood and still loved her friends. So she is, for me, she always called her friend her Greek sister, but for me, Verla is a sister I will remember for the rest of my life. And I'd like to paraphrase Proverbs 14 that says, "A friend is someone who sticketh closer than a sister."
My name is Stephanie Mays, and I met Verla when I was 15, which was just a few days ago. Courtesy of my big brother, Philip, who had come to the University of Washington to work on his PhD. Philip always spoke highly of this Kwiram family that he had become close to in Seattle. I remember being a bit love-struck and wordless by the Kwirams, these generous people who had a gorgeous house, great kids, who seemed like they completely had it all together. Brent and Sydney, I realize you don't have it all together now, but then I did. But in particular, I felt mesmerized by Verla, who emanated warmth to me and as Philip's little sister. I don't suppose Philip mentioned to the Kwirams that he sort of came as a package deal. There were 5 siblings. We were all coming. And we were somewhat competitive. You'll know why in a minute. You know, Philip found out that I'm speaking, and he's like, well, I want to speak too. Anyway, fast forward several years, and by then the aura of Philip had worn off. He'd gone off to Berkeley, and I came to law school here at the University of Washington, and I got the Kwirams all to myself. And they really treated me as an extension of my brother, which was awesome. It meant that without having to work at it, I had a Seattle family. Hugely important because it was the first time I was away from home. I came to know that to be loved by Verla meant being fully and totally, completely embraced. It meant being nurtured and encouraged, including some cooking lessons. I mean, I thought as a starving graduate student, I knew how to at least boil spaghetti. Surprise, there's a right way and a wrong way. I knew the wrong way. And so, she would also ensure that if even you couldn't afford a huge meal, it was important that it was cooked right and beautifully and plated well. Verla had a terrific sense of humor, and she loved to laugh. Her eyes would light up, and she would lean into happiness of that moment. For example, movies. Some might have assumed that with all of you heard today, Verla's appreciation of art, music, and culture did not extend to pop culture, but Verla and Alvin were up for a whole range of movies. I remember once our kids wanted to go see one of the Jurassic Park movies. So sure enough, Grandma Verla and Grandpa Alvin were game. And I remember our son Gabe worrying out loud, I wonder if Grandma Verla knows this isn't a documentary. But Verla did indeed enjoy a good laugh as much as the next person, and I still fondly remember her unrestrained laughter when I had taken her to see Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy in Bowfinger. But most importantly, Verla loved the kids and their delighted faces so much that she was willing to put up with, as Gabe put it, dinosaurs eating people like popcorn. So it was a great bonding time. Verla was my second mom. She hosted all my major milestones here in Seattle. Graduation from law school, buying my first house, talking me off the ledge in sheer panic with that purchase. My wedding shower, she and Alvin standing up as our Seattle parents at our wedding, the birth of our children, their violin performances, Jeremy's graduation from grad school, road tripping to see Michelle Obama in Vancouver, BC, going with me to see Maya Angelou downtown. I'm kind of irritated. Jennifer, I thought I was the one that got her for that. But, and yet when Verla asked me to speak at this memorial service, I was both honored but intimidated. I wondered how could I condense and communicate to you the palpable and all-consuming love she so freely gave me and that I'm blessed to have experienced. So I want to leave you with 3 stories. The first happened years ago when I was still in law school. We had a young girl, perhaps 11 or 12, come to this church to play a postlude recital. This young pianist and her very proud mother sat in the front row right there, ready for the postlude, and as she began to play at a virtuosic level, her memory slipped, and she couldn't remember what came next. She tried again and again, but her fingers simply could not remember the music. Dejected, she got up from the piano and sat down. And I remember distinctly that her mother stiffened and did not reach out to comfort this poor young girl. And without hesitation, Verla quickly moved down the aisle with warmth, with love, with intention and invitation. She spoke to the congregation and the girl. She said directly to the young girl, who was clearly humiliated and embarrassed, clearly feeling the shame and her mother's displeasure. Verla said, "We so love hearing you play, and I know you know this piece very well, and you have an immense talent. I see you have your music with you. Would you do us the honor of finishing the piece with your music?" And just like that, this girl finished her piece gloriously, receiving abundant adoration from the congregation and restoring her own sense of self-worth. That was quintessential Verla, her ability to see a person and help the rest of us see them too. She modeled the gumption and wisdom we all need, showing us that sitting on the sidelines will not do, and that getting up to help is always the answer. She encouraged, she loved, and by example, she invited us to rise to the need of the moment too. Another story, we were coming home from North Carolina with our daughter Phoebe. We were exhausted. We were traveling with 2 young children. And by the time we hit SeaTac and got in the taxi home, we were starving, utterly spent and just overwhelmed. We thought, what are we going to eat? Who can help? One word, Verla. We literally called her from the taxi. and said, Verla, we're starving. And of course, she and Alvin showed up at our house just a few minutes after we got home with delicious food. And she and Alvin fed us and held our babies while we got to sleep. It was amazing. It was Mom. It was Mom showing up, showing us a slice of heaven. Her love for us and for our kids was utterly palpable and did not end. The last story I want to share highlights Verla's hospitality, which is a thing of legend. Every hosting tip and secret I have, I learned from Verla, and from her having intentional flowers to preparing and serving food, and certainly under no circumstances, don't serve good food on paper plates. Our kids graduated from high school during COVID, and that meant that any celebration would have to account for social distancing. In our attempt to be creative, we thought maybe we could do something simple like ask folk to bring their boxed lunch and we could provide dessert. The thing is, our backyard was not exceptionally large and couldn't accommodate a crowd, and frankly, we love a good crowd. So of course, I reached out to my mom, Verla. All I asked was, could we use your backyard as the site of the picnic? And a number of you witnessed vintage Verla that Sunday afternoon. Rather than allow something as common as paper bags, Verla had ideas that it needed to be catered. Tents would be erected, round tables with gorgeous linens, beautiful flowers, cake and pastries. And why was I surprised? She did this for all of the fabulous wedding showers and baby showers that she hosted, because there's something that she could communicate with her intentional hosting. You mattered. You didn't just exist, you mattered. And of course, she celebrated us and our kids in grand style, knowing it was likely to be the last big Verla-style party at their house. There are definitely other meaningful stories I could share, like the time she marched with us in the Seattle Women's March, carrying a protest sign, but I know I'm at time. Still, there's just a few words I feel compelled to share with you, because Verla shared this love of Maya Angelou, and we so enjoyed our time going to the Maya Angelou reading. I want to close with a poem from Maya Angelou that I'm sure she wrote for someone like Verla. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder, lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil in silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly. Our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms, slowly and always, irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses, restored, never to be the same, whisper to us, they existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed.
I've been given 59 seconds. I think I have a distinction here. Have any of you cooked for the Kwirams? Okay, of those of you who have cooked for the Kwirams, have any of you poisoned them? Okay, I think I'm the only one who came close to doing this. When I met Verla here, and my first impression was, wow, Alvin, you are one lucky man. She was engaged, she had the intellect, she could see into your soul and talk about what really mattered to you. So I decided one day, and they would invite me to their house all the time, but I didn't want this to be a one-way relationship. So I decided one day I would have them over for dinner. Now, my sister didn't mention that we're from the West Indies. We don't use cookbooks in the West Indies. There are no recipes on coconuts, so we make things up. But not this time. I was having the Kwirams over. So I decided to go to I don't know where I found these recipes, but I said I had to really make this special. And one of the recipes I made called for kirsch. And I think Alvin will remember this story. Growing up a Seventh-day Adventist, I was not very steeped in alcoholic beverages or their content. So I followed this recipe impeccably, and halfway through the meal, Verla said, "A bit heavy on the kirsch, weren't you, Philip?" Alvin said nothing. We laughed a lot. They managed to not get drunk or be poisoned. They left, went back to Windermere, and we became incredible friends. But after that meal, I went back to my old way of cooking the West Indian style, not using a single recipe, because I saw that it was a complete disaster. They really did serve as, Verla really was my second mother. But I had a secret. And the secret was that I came from a big family. There are 5 of us. And one by one, they would be migrating to Seattle. And you've all seen the movie Parasite. So it's not like that, but it's not like we hung out in the basement with a light bulb and as a beacon. But we all moved to Seattle. And we all became part of the Kwiram family. And I spent quite a lot of time with Brant and Sydney. I taught Brant tennis. Sydney and I would just joke around. We watched a very important tennis match together, Sydney. The match between McEnroe and Borg in Wimbledon. That, you didn't want, but anyway, so I'm a big tennis person, and I taught Brant tennis. And, so over the years, we would talk quite a lot. And one time, actually, let me just see if I can remember what the next part of this is. I probably can't. So let me just say that, sometimes in your family, you have some difficulties. And Verla was having some difficulties with my father. And I got an email from her one day. "Why don't you come out to Seattle for your father's 80th birthday?" And it's a sort of email that once you get it, you realize you have no good reason for not coming. And she said it would be, I looked at the email yesterday, it said it would be you could come as a surprise and it would be the best gift ever. Well, I came with my son Orestes, and it was an incredible gift. And it's that email and coming here to Seattle for my father's 80th that reignited my relationship with my father. So Verla was someone who I felt deeply about, and she valued family, not just hers, but my relationship with my father, although I don't know how she really understood that, but that was an extremely key moment. And because of that, my relationship with my father was completely changed. So thank you, Verla.
Dear Nana, I remember when you got me that giant stuffed giraffe that was taller than I am. I didn't tell you this, but Mama tried to hide it from me and then tried to return it, but it was too big and didn't fit in the car. Then I found it and prohibited Mama from returning it. Then I put it in my room, even though it didn't fit even there. I wore some of your pearls today because I know how much we both like them. They're perfect circles, like little runes around my neck and on my ears. I also remember my surprise 5th birthday party, which you threw for me. There were balloons, streamers, and fancy everything. There was also a giant chocolate cake, iridescent strawberries, and a lot of presents. I'll look for you in the iridescent hummingbird that whirs and dips into beautiful hydrangeas and roses. I love you and wish I could have known you longer. Love, Cassia.
Dear Nana, I remember taking you on super fast joyrides in your wheelchair around the Mirabella. I remember that you rented a bouncy house with a slide for Uncle Davis's birthday, and we went down it over and over again. We all thought that was fun. You were always game for adventure, like the Fierce Wheel, the aquarium, and the Space Needle. I love you so much, and I wish I had more time to know you. Love, Andreas.
Nana, you were more than just a grandmother. You were loving, compassionate, smart, kind, and much more. I remember going into your garden with Cassia and picking mint to make you tea. I remember the smell of the flowers in your garden, especially the roses. I remember how you smiled at us as you sipped the tea. I will never be able to repay you for all the love and empathy you showed for me. I will never be able to put into words how much I admire you. I don't just love you. I cherish, admire, and adore you, and I'm deeply thankful for all the gifts and kind words that made me smile. But I'm even more thankful that you are, and forever will be, my Nana, your Saskia.
Dear Nana, I will always be thinking of you. I wish I could be with you more. I will always love you. Everyone will always love you. I hope you have a peaceful time in heaven. We will miss you. We love you, Nana. We love you.
Let's pray. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Amen.